Pitfall 3D Beyond the Jungle is an action-styled platform game that was released for the PlayStation in 1998 and also got a port to the Nintendo Game Boy Color later that year. And the game itself is a successor to the ever popular and iconic Pitfall game that would have been seen originally on the Atari 2600. But this game moves into full 3D, allowing players to move around the levels, environments and interact pretty much everything, where you have to collect different elements, treasures, while also defeating enemies and solving puzzles to unlock additional areas to explore. And you also do have a load of hidden secrets within the levels as well to try and find, that will also help you to gain extra lives and so forth. The game itself, although while decent in its own right, the game did receive somewhat mixed reviews among magazines, stating that even though there's many fun elements in the game, which there is, the game was hampered by the sensitivity of the controls, and especially with the cameras during the platforming sections of the levels, which I can definitely relate to. Like, going back years ago, my first experience with this game was that one of my brothers had gotten it for Christmas. I have 4 brothers, but 3 of them, like myself, were mad into video games, but one of them wasn't really into games as such. But funny enough, he did actually like this game. He really enjoyed it. It was one of the few games he would allow himself to play, and he got it for Christmas one year, and we actually all played it and enjoyed it for what it was. And I really liked the whole aesthetic of the game, and I love the witty humour, because even looking back on it now, I didn't realise even years ago that Bruce Campbell from The Evil Dead also does the voice of the character in this game. It's only now when I look back on it now years later that I understand the humour and the quick cheeky quips and one-liners, and it is very funny for what it's trying to do. But where the game does fall short, like, the game itself plays really well, but it can be a bit clunky in terms of trying to get past some of the level environments, and especially on the platforming sections, especially when the camera transitions from one platform to another, because there are certain points when you're trying to jump, especially with moving platforms, and you have to jump at a point where the camera has to transition. And the problem with it is that sometimes the control system can completely confuse you, or confuse itself in terms of what direction you're supposed to be in. And the main downside with this game is, from my own experience of playing it, is that you will lose a lot of lives just on one frustrating part, as the camera itself is probably its worst feature. But again, once you get used to it and you get familiar with the levels, you will be able to get far in it. It uses a life-based system, so you have to be very, very careful with your jumps and how you interact with environments, because you will fall and die a lot in this game. There's no ifs or buts about it. You will. I suppose the one advantage nowadays, if you're playing it through emulation, that you can use save states to save it at any time if you want to play more cautiously. But if you try to go all out and just go bananas in this game, it will crucify you. Let's just put it that way. All your lives will be gone instantly. And there's certain levels in the game, especially when you get further into it, that it will test your patience and it will crucify you for mistakes that you make, because everything's all about timing and being aware of your surroundings. But even with that, with the level design, you do have different healing stations that crop up every now and then, where you have like a field that you can stand in, and it gives you your health back, which is definitely a must. But in saying that, you can only go and heal yourself, and then you could jump off a cliff then in the next part, or fall off a ledge, and then you lose your life anyway. So sometimes you're kind of like lost for what's going on. You're just lost for words. You're like, why all the work that you had to try and get your health back, only to lose the life instantly then a couple of seconds later. And that will happen a lot in this game as well. It is frustrating, don't get me wrong, but I have to say now, from my own experience and time playing it, it has many elements seen of games that you would have remembered, such as Crash Bandicoot, especially with the platforming elements, because everything is time based. You have to be very specific when you jump. You have to make sure that you jump at the right time, because if you get it wrong, you're crucified. But unlike many of the Crash games where everything was linear, where you had one path to follow, Pitfall 3D, you are allowed to move around the environment that you're in. So that in itself can sometimes confuse players, and then coupled with that, with the tricky camera at times, can also make it difficult for players to navigate jumps and various areas, especially when you're trying to find some of the hidden secrets in the levels as well. But one of the cool aspects I found with the game as well is that the loading screens, what it tries to do is it tries to tell a story almost from a comic book style perspective, where it has really cool kind of comic book style art that you would have been familiar with 90s style comics, like action hero comics and so forth. And the art style is really, really cool. Like, even for myself growing up, I used to love reading comic books, and I loved all the visual art style, and they definitely do it well in this game. And they use that then to tell the story pretty much, or to give you a hint of certain objectives, especially later on when you have to fight like bosses, or in most cases you don't really fight them as such, but you always have to do something, or you have to can interact with certain elements within a level to finish the boss off so that you can get out of the area that you're in. But the levels themselves, when you combine everything together, like when you get past the first major section of the game is quite long, and it can kind of fool you to an extent because you've spent hours trying to get from point A to point B, and then you defeat a boss and you think that the game's over, only to realise that you have to go through the whole process again through a bunch of different levels. And the game does have quite a lot of replay value, but it really all depends on how well you do in the levels, and especially if you can accumulate enough lives to keep you going throughout the experience. It's one of those games, essentially, it wouldn't be for everyone. Some people will revel in it and love the whole aesthetic and the idea of it, while others will probably find it very frustrating. But for those that like a challenge and that really enjoy platforming games, this is another one that I think you should really try. And like I said, the cool element about it is it does have some really fun moments and really good game mechanics. It's just the camera can somewhat be a bit clunky, but I love the atmosphere and the humour in the dialogue, especially with the voiceover from Bruce Campbell. I just think it's really, really funny. I think that really sets the tone for the whole premise of the game moving forward, and it just falls in nicely with the likes of the comic book style elements with the intros and the loading screens. It just does have some unique appeal to it, and while it's not the most fleshed out platformer out there, again, this was at a point when 3D games, even though the PlayStation had been out at a few years at this point, 3D platforming games were still experimental in that sense. Like Crash Bandicoot had perfected the system, but it focused on a more of a linear approach to 3D platforming, whereas other games were trying to go for a more open world kind of idea. And you had other games out there that were coming out, like Spyro the Dragon, you had Croc, and you had a number of other really, really good platforming games. While Pitfall wouldn't be seen as good as those, which in most cases it probably isn't, it definitely offers a good and unique alternative to those games if you're looking for something different, if you will, as there's enough challenges. Plus, for each level that you do play, there's always some sort of objective, like you have to find keys, or you have to unlock certain elements or hit switches in order to unlock various aspects of a cage or a door that you can go through so that you can find a teleportation area so that you can proceed to the next level. So there's always a multitude of different objectives, and that's the reason why a lot of the levels do go on for a wee bit longer than they probably should. Plus as well, if you're constantly losing lives, it's going to take a lot longer, let's just put it that way, because that will happen in this game. But aside from that, yes, it's going to frustrate a lot of players, I get that, and I'm sure some of you out there that played the game over the years will probably imagine that or remember that. But for those that put time into it, it is a good experience. If you can overlook the flaws and the quirky elements of the game, it is a fun game in all respects to it. And even for myself personally, and for my brothers, we all enjoyed the game years ago and played it quite a bit over the years. Like, it just really was a fun game, aside from the elements as I mentioned and dying a lot. But yeah, it was fun. It just has enough character about it to make it appealing, and the fact is that there's loads of replay value in it as such, again from a standpoint that the levels are overly long, so you'll find yourself always having to go back to try them again. So even if you do have a save point, or you can use a password system, it will still give you that option to revisit that level so that you can keep trying to get better at it. And it's one of those games that you do have to put time into it, in fairness. There are certain elements of the game that sometimes can go a bit out of your control, especially when you're in like cave levels, and then there's this kind of like crystal liquid that when you go over it forces the character to hover in the air. That can be a pain because you've no real control over various elements, so you have to move very, very slowly. If you move too fast, it's like skating on ice. You go flying off a ledge and then you lose another life. So you can lose all of your lives very quickly if you're not aware of your surroundings in this game, and I found that out the hard way over the years from playing this game. That happened to me a lot. So you do learn very, very quickly when you're playing games like this to adapt to different situations, and like I said, to be aware of your surroundings, because that's the key with this game, is to always be mindful of what's going on around you at all times. But if you do enjoy platforming games, while this isn't the best one, it definitely offers something a wee bit different and even funny as well at the same time that might take away from your typical style of games. And while it may not be for everyone, I think personally that it is worth a try if you are a fan of platforming games, especially 3D games on the PlayStation. And I would love to know your thoughts of Pitfall 3D for the PS1, if you have played this game yourself back in the day, and if so, what did you think of it overall? Did you enjoy the game, or did you find it as frustrating or as quirky or just annoying at times, as many of us have? I'd love to hear whatever stories you have of this quirky game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated of future videos. And if you would like to see more content around other types of platforming games similar to Pitfall 3D that was also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out this playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.
Give your hand.